The year was 2020. The world was deep in the grip of the COVID-19 pandemic. Hospitals had become both battlefields and sanctuaries, places where exhaustion and hope lived side by side. At the Reina Sofía Clinic in Bogotá, Colombia, the night was quiet, almost too quiet. It was the end of a long shift for one doctor. His eyes were heavy, but something caught his attention, something unusual. He lifted his phone and began snapping photos, not of patients, not of equipment, but of something else. Something that seemed to appear in unexpected places. A corridor, the chapel. When he looked at the images, his heart skipped a beat. There, in the grainy glow of the hospital lights, was a figure delicate, luminous, shaped in a way that many would recognize instantly. Word spread quickly. Among those who saw the photos was William Pinzón, a witness who spoke with conviction. "I am certain that it is the Virgin Mary," he said without hesitation. He claimed that in one photo, taken in the hallway, the image was even clearer. "She never touches the floor," he explained. "She appears to be levitating." Others who viewed the photos felt the same. Maria Francia, director of Casita de la Virgen, spoke with emotion. "She is visiting the sick in the world of COVID because it hurts her. She is a loving mother." But not everyone was quick to call it a miracle. Photographer Fernando Vergara offered a different explanation. He noted that the clinic's chapel was surrounded by glass, which could create strong reflections. "If there were no statue of the Virgin in the chapel," he said, "we would clearly be talking about an apparition. But glass can play tricks on the eye. Was it a heavenly visitation or a simple optical effect?" No official investigation was opened, and the church remained silent. Yet for many who were there, it didn't matter. Whether by divine intervention or coincidence, the message felt the same: that Our Lady, the Mother of Christ, is always close to us in our pain. And in the darkest moments of the pandemic, that belief brought light to a place filled with suffering. In the days after the photos began circulating online, the images traveled far beyond Bogotá. They reached Catholic forums, WhatsApp groups, and even international media. Many wondered, would the church investigate? But no official statement came. There was no formal inquiry, no declaration of a miracle. The Archdiocese of Bogotá did not confirm nor deny the possibility of a supernatural event. To some, that silence was disappointing. They hoped for validation, for the church to confirm that heaven had touched the halls of a hospital during one of humanity's darkest hours. Now this next story is even more stunning. The streets of Cartagena were warm that June evening in 2016, the air heavy with the sounds of the city. Lorna Cepeda, one of Colombia's most recognizable actresses, was there for work. Known to millions for her role as Patricia Fernandez in the hit soap opera Yo Soy Betty La Fea, she had lived her share of moments in the spotlight. But that night, under the lights of a television set, something unusual happened, something that had nothing to do with acting. As she prepared for her scene, a sound technician approached her from behind to adjust her microphone. His voice was casual, almost offhand. "Hey," he said, "something's bleeding on your back." Lorna smiled and shrugged it off. "Ah, probably a mosquito bite," she said, barely giving it a thought. Days turned into weeks. Work continued. Life moved on. And the small spot on her back, out of her sight and out of her mind, remained forgotten. 5 months later, in the ordinary quiet of her home, someone else noticed. The man who helped care for her children spoke with a sudden tone of alarm. "Jeffin, you have something horrible on your back." This time, She asked him to take a photo. The image made her stomach turn. It wasn't a simple bite. It was a mole, large, dark, swollen, and bleeding. It was a disgusting thing, she later admitted. It bled and bled and bled. Still, part of her clung to the hope that it was nothing serious. Maybe a wart, maybe something harmless. But she couldn't ignore it any longer. She made an appointment with a dermatologist. The specialist took one look and immediately ordered an emergency biopsy. Days later, the phone rang with the news she had feared but hadn't prepared for. It was melanoma skin cancer. The word hit her like a wave. She sat with the phone in her hand, feeling the weight of every fear she had ever carried. Cancer, a disease that can take so much, so quickly. She thought of her children. She thought of the future she might not see. And for the first time, she realized just how fragile life truly is. That night, Lorna stood before an image of Our Lady of the Miraculous Medal in her home. The room was dim, lit only by a small lamp in the corner. Shadows stretched across the walls, and the faint smell of candle wax lingered in the air. She had walked past this image countless times before, but never had she approached it with a heart so heavy. She had grown up with faith, but this was different. This was no ordinary prayer. It was a cry from the deepest part of her soul, stripped of all formality. "My God, Lord, I give this to you," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Make whatever decision you want to make. If you leave me here, please let me be healthy. If you tell me I have to go, decide for me, because you make better decisions than I do. And I'll know my children will be okay." Her words were not bargaining, they were surrender. In that quiet room, she let go of the illusion of control. She acknowledged that her life had always been in God's hands now. She was simply giving it back to Him. She stayed there for a long time, gazing at the serene face of the Virgin Mary. The blue and white colors of the medal seemed to glow faintly in the soft light. She thought about her children's laughter, about the mornings she hoped to see again, about the future that now felt so uncertain. She thought, too, about how quickly life could change from a casual comment by a technician in Cartagena to a cancer diagnosis that could alter everything. In the days that followed, she lived in a strange rhythm, moving between medical appointments and moments of stillness, between the cold sterility of hospital corridors and the warmth of whispered prayers at home. The oncologist was clear. The mole had to be removed as soon as possible. There was no time to waste. Yet amid all the fear, there was a quiet thread of trust running through her. A sense that somehow, in some way, she was not walking through this alone. Then, one ordinary day, something extraordinary happened. She was at home, moving about her room, when she bent down to move her cat, Macho, out of the way. "Macho, get out of here," she said, gently pushing at the air in front of her. But there was no cat. She froze. Her breath caught. It was as if something unseen was whispering, "Stay still." And then she felt it, a pressure on her back, the unmistakable sensation of a human hand. The weight was firm but gentle. She could feel each finger resting against her skin, the palm pressing lightly, the warmth spreading through her back like sunlight breaking through clouds. It wasn't frightening. In fact, it brought an overwhelming sense of peace, as though every muscle in her body was being told to let go of fear. In that moment, she thought, "They're treating me. I don't think I have anything left." She didn't know who they were, but she knew this. Something beyond the ordinary had just happened. When the oncologist called her back for follow-up tests, Lorna was still expecting to move forward with surgery. The plan had been clear: remove the mole quickly, check the surrounding tissue, and begin treatment if necessary. She went into the clinic prepared for that path, anxious, but resolved. The nurses moved with quiet efficiency, guiding her through the process as they had many patients before. The smell of antiseptic hung in the air, and the sound of carts rolling over the polished floor echoed down the hallway. She sat in the waiting area, looking at the sterile white walls, thinking how strange it was that such an ordinary place could be the setting for life-changing news. Then came the tests, scans, imaging, examinations. She noticed a subtle shift in the doctors' expressions as they reviewed the results, exchanging glances that were more curious than concerned. Finally, the words came. "There's nothing here," the doctor said, his tone almost puzzled. "No metastases, no trace of cancer cells. It's completely gone." She blinked, unsure if she had heard him correctly. "Gone?" "Yes," he replied, flipping through her file. "It's gone. We can't find anything to operate on." In the quiet that followed, a rush of emotions surged through her: relief, gratitude, disbelief, and a deep, unshakable sense that her life had just been handed back to her. It was difficult to process. Only weeks earlier, she had been staring down a diagnosis that could have taken everything from her. And now, the danger had vanished as quickly as it had come. When she finally shared her story in an interview, her voice was steady, but carried the weight of someone who knew she had walked through the valley and returned. "There was nothing left to operate on," she said, the words simple but full of meaning. A clip of that interview began circulating online. At first, only a handful of people commented: friends, admirers, and those who had followed her career. But soon, the numbers began to climb. Dozens became hundreds, and hundreds became thousands. Over 59,000 likes poured in, along with a flood of comments. People from across the world wrote to her, not only to congratulate her, but to share their own experiences, stories of healings, of faith, of moments when they too had felt something they couldn't explain. One person wrote, "I was healed by His mercy and without surgery. I had been given up for dead with 5 metastases. It's been 16 years and glory to God." Another shared, "I was in unbearable pain, even with morphine. I felt someone take my hand and bring me to a beautiful place. Jesus brought me back." And still another said, "During a serious health crisis, I saw a saint appear beside me, pointing to a painting of the Virgin Mary. My life was in her hands." Each testimony echoed something of Lorna's own experience, creating a thread that connected strangers through a shared belief that there is more to this world than what we can see, and that sometimes, in the most desperate of moments, the impossible becomes reality. When Lorna sat down to tell her story for the first time, she didn't imagine how far it would travel. She thought it might touch a few people, maybe inspire someone who was struggling. But the ripple effect was far greater than she expected. What began as a deeply personal testimony quickly became something larger, a conversation that spanned countries, languages, and backgrounds. The comments section beneath her video became a kind of open confessional, a place where people spoke honestly about their fears, their pain, and their moments of grace. Some wrote in joy, celebrating her healing as proof that God still moves in our world today. Others wrote in longing, sharing that they were still waiting for their own miracle. And some, even in the midst of their suffering, wrote words of gratitude, thanking God for every breath, for every sunrise, for the people they loved. It was as if her healing had unlocked a floodgate of hidden stories. For Lorna, it was humbling. In interviews afterward, she often said that she wasn't anyone special, just a woman who got sick, prayed, and saw something extraordinary happen. But perhaps that was exactly why her testimony resonated so deeply. She wasn't a preacher on a stage or a theologian speaking in lofty terms. She was someone the public knew, someone whose face they had seen on television for years, now speaking with raw vulnerability about something deeply human: fear of death, the love of family, and the hope of divine help. People could see themselves in her. The details of her healing, the prayer before the image of Our Lady of the Miraculous Medal, the invisible hand pressing warmly against her back. The sudden disappearance of the cancer gave her testimony a sense of both intimacy and mystery. It wasn't just a list of facts. It was a story. And stories have a way of reaching places that arguments cannot. In many ways, Lorna's healing happened in a world primed to hear it. The years following her 2016 diagnosis had been marked by uncertainty, pandemics, economic struggles, political unrest. People everywhere were looking for signs of hope, for reminders that there was still goodness, still beauty, still the possibility of unexpected joy. Her story offered that. It didn't promise that every prayer would be answered in the way we want. It didn't claim that faith is a shield against all suffering. But it did whisper something deeply encouraging, that God sees, God hears, and God can act in ways we don't anticipate. And for many, that was enough. Of course, not everyone accepted the story at face value. Some in the medical field pointed out that there are rare cases where the immune system can aggressively attack and eliminate certain cancers, particularly melanoma. Others suggested that a misdiagnosis might have been possible, though the records indicated otherwise. But here's the thing: Lorna never claimed that her story was meant to be medical proof. She wasn't holding up charts or demanding belief. She was simply telling what happened to her, the way she experienced it. And that's the nature of testimonies. They live in the space between the measurable and the mysterious. You can study them, analyze them, try to explain them away. But at the heart of every testimony is a person saying, "This is what I lived. This is what I saw. This is what I felt." The fact that her moment of surrender happened before the image of the miraculous medal gave the story another layer of meaning for many Catholics. The miraculous medal has a long history, tracing back to 1830, when Saint Catherine Labouré, a French nun, reported that the Virgin Mary appeared to her and asked for a medal to be made in her likeness. The medal bore the words, "O Mary, conceived without sin, pray for us who have recourse to thee." Since then, countless believers have worn it as a sign of devotion, a physical reminder of Mary's intercession and God's mercy. For those familiar with this devotion, Lorna's healing seemed to echo that legacy, another instance of help given in response to a prayer made with trust. In the weeks after her healing, life slowly returned to its normal rhythms. There were no more biopsies, no more surgical preparations. Her energy returned. She could laugh again without the shadow of fear. But the quiet after a storm can feel different. Lorna carried a deeper awareness of life's fragility, and with it, a heightened gratitude. Simple moments, a meal with her children, a walk in the sun, the sound of rain at night became treasures, and she carried, too, a quiet responsibility. When you've been given something so extraordinary, you can't help but feel the weight of sharing it. Not to prove anything, not to convince the skeptics, but to let others know that they are not alone in their struggles, and that there is always room for hope. The thousands of comments under her testimony were like a chorus, each voice adding a different note. A man in Argentina wrote, "I lost my mother to cancer last year. Hearing your story reminds me that she's still close, that God still cares." A young woman in the Philippines shared, "I've been praying for my father's healing for 3 years. Your story gave me the strength to keep going." An elderly nun in Spain wrote simply, "Daughter, this is what it means when we say, 'Mary brings us to Jesus.' You have been touched by grace." For some, the story was a confirmation of what they already believed. For others, it was an invitation to consider that maybe, just maybe, the world is more layered than they had imagined. So she keeps telling her story. In interviews, on social media, in conversations with friends, She shares the moment when her fear gave way to peace and her illness gave way to health. And every time she tells it, she notices the same thing. People listen differently when the story is personal. Their eyes soften. Their posture changes. They lean in. Because deep down, we all long for stories where light breaks into darkness, where hope wins, where heaven touches earth. May God bless you.